In order to work with decimals, we must know about place value. We work in a system that is base 10. What we mean by that is this point right here called the decimal. Notice the deci in front, the prefix. Deci in front is telling you base 10. Going to the left, we have the ones, we have the tens, and we have the hundreds. And if I continue to the left, I would continue multiplying by 10 for each location of place. Going to the right, and we're going to divide by 10. That would be 1/10. This would be 1/100th, 1/1000th, and so forth. What we're going to be worried about is place value versus face value. What do we mean by that? Face value is just the name of the digit. For example, if I look at the 5 in this location, I would say 5 is the digit, the place value is the tens, or the number itself, so that would be 50. So when we read this number, we don't say 153.47. The 4 has a place, and that 4 is in the tenths, and the 7 is in the hundredths. So when we read this number, we read it 153 and 47/100ths. To read the number after the decimal, you look at the entire number, the 47, and you look at what position it sits in. It sits in the hundredth, so we say 47/100ths. Now when we're going to work with decimals, we're going to think of money. It might help us out just a little bit. So the first position after the decimal, the tenths, we're going to think of that as a dime, as there's 10 dimes equaling a whole or a dollar. Each dime is a tenth. In order to add decimals, we're going to do a process called decompose. So when we decompose something, that means we're going to take it apart. So I'm going to decompose the 28 and 3/10 into 20 for the tens, 8 for the ones, and 3/10 for after the decimal. We're going to add to that 7 in the ones and 5/10, adding the tens column, the ones column, and the tenths column. Combining these, I get 35 and 8/10, which can be rewritten as 35 and 8/10. Notice the decimal, one position after, is the tenths. So using decimals and decomposition, I would write this as 20 plus 8 plus 3/10. I'm going to add to that 7 plus 5/10. Again, adding each place value. Remember, this is the ones and the tens. Here's my decimal. 3/10 and 5/10 is 8/10. Combining, I get 35 and 8/10. So that's decompose. We're also going to use partial sums. And this is a method that we did in our regular addition. Partial sums. We're going to first take the tens column and add it, and I have 20. Taking my ones column, I have 15. Notice I'm lining up my position. The decimals line up, so I know when I add the 3 and the 5, they're both in the tenths column, and that gives me 8/10. Combining my tens, my ones, and my tenths, I get 35 and 8/10. Let's try another one. This one has hundredths. So I've got my tens, my ones, my tenths, and my hundredths. Now when I'm thinking about money here, I'd be thinking about pennies. So I have 70 plus 5 plus 7/10 plus 1/100th. That's what it looks like decomposed into fractions. Next value, I have 20 plus 9 plus 8/10 plus 2/100ths. I'm going to add. Notice the fractions are like denominators in the columns going down, so these tens have like denominators, so I can combine them. Adding my tens, I have 90. Adding my ones, I have 14. Adding my tenths, I have 15 tenths and 3 100ths. From what we studied earlier with fractions, 15 tenths is really going to be 1 5/10. So now I'm going to add my wholes. 90 and 14 is 104, plus the 1, plus the 5/10, plus the 3 100ths, combining to be 105, 5/10, and notice my decimal, and 3 100ths. Using partial sums, adding my tens, 90, adding my ones, 14, adding my tenths. If I add that, I have 15 dimes, which is $1.50. Adding my pennies, I have 3. Adding my pennies, my dimes, or my hundredths and my tenths, my ones, and my tens. If I wanted to show this using decimals and decomposition, it would be 70 plus 5 plus 0.7 plus 0.01. Now again, that 0.7 should be read as 7/10. The 0.1 is 1 100th. I'm going to add to that 20. My ones are 9. My tenths, 8. And my hundredths. Now notice I need to still put it in its position. I can't just write a 2. I have to write it in a hundredth form. Adding my tens, my ones, my tenths, and my hundredths. Combining my wholes gives me 105 with 5/10 and 3 100ths. We'll continue this lecture and add numbers where one of the pieces is missing. So there'll be a second part of this lecture.